Welcome to the True Wealth Project, where we talk business, real estate, and lifestyle on your way to building a wealthy life for generations to come. I'm your host, Sam Khairi, and I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the True Wealth Project. I'm your host, Sam Khairi. I'm super excited to have John Laine today. John and I met a few weeks ago. I want to say we met online. It's kind of weird to say it that way, but we met on LinkedIn. And John, thanks for agreeing to be on my show. I can't wait to get this episode going.
I'm genuinely happy to be here. It's kind of this, like, the idea of true wealth is something I absolutely resonate with.
Oh,
Helping
totally.
people build legacy wealth. When I saw the name of your podcast, I was like, yep, I want to be there.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, and we try to be a little kind of general, if you would, on asset classes and investments and things like that. Just because I think just talking about generally building wealth, I think it's it's got different layers and different aspects to it, which I really want to bring that out for everybody. And obviously, what we're going to talk about today is yet another piece of the puzzle, and kind of a vehicle to get there. So without that further ado, let's get into it. I know we were just before the show, we were kind of talking about some of your background. It's super fascinating to hear your story, and just knowing where you've been and now continuing to operate, and it just like, I'm not going to ruin it. If you could tell us your
All right.
story. I really want to kind of get a little more detail on your story, on how things came about, and we'll go from there.
So it's always, I get super anxious, right? I'm all about, like, my stress toys, right?
Oh,
This
that's
is who
amazing.
I am at this point in my life. I always get really nervous about telling my story. My story is very, very weird. Started with a golf ball sized brain tumor about 33 years ago. I got super, super sick, ended up with I sold shoes, right? Mild manner, Al Bundy, make all the
Yep.
jokes you want. I love selling shoes. I love sitting at the feet of little old ladies. I'm trying to do this really fast because
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
got sick. Ended up with a golf ball sized brain tumor, basically square smack dab in the middle. You'll notice I have a weird speech cadence. That's definitely one
Couldn't
of
tell. I'll say I couldn't
yeah,
tell.
I will do, like, weird things with words pretty regularly. But that's one of I have many side effects. But I got sick, and because I was selling shoes, I clearly could not pay for the kind of money that
Yep.
a brain surgery would cost. So, um, I saw a late night infomercial, Robert Allen, No Money Down seminar, something like 20 years ago. And that's where it started. I built my first transaction. I did $25,000 in 6 weeks. And
Wow.
that started to pay for my medical. And I started getting better, and I got better meds, better treatment. And ultimately, I got better overall.
That's awesome.
But the start was this real estate transaction kind of brought me into I lost my house in a foreclosure because I was sick. And so as I was laying in a hospital bed, I started helping other people who were in foreclosure try to keep their house. So I kind of created
Gotcha.
this whole uh, sale and leaseback program, which really had never been done before. And so I would go in, and because of my situation, I could empathize with other people.
Absolutely.
And I knew the loss of losing your home. And I tried helping. We helped hundreds, 200 or 300 or 400 people
That's
stay in
amazing.
their house, retain most of their equity, rebuild their financial security, and lower their monthly payments. Like, those are the four hot buttons. And
That's
yeah, I
amazing.
did that for a couple of years. I taught lots of other people how to do it. The whole idea of compassionate capitalism was kind of this message I was trying to convey. And then I went to South Carolina and started buying a whole bunch of properties there. And I was kind of getting tired of this single family res piece of it.
Sure.
Saw this bright, shiny 13-story apartment building and decided, hey, Lehman Brothers, you've been wanting to give me some money for a while. Why don't we just And so all of a sudden, March of '08, I buy this 13-story apartment building, start doing it was a condo conversion, right?
Okay.
That whole craze, everybody wanted to
That's
do a
right.
condo
That's right.
conversion in '08.
Absolutely.
3 months, 6 months later, Lehman was closed. We were in the middle of a $6 million renovation, and I had a $90,000 mortgage and no ability to pay it.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I went 77 million in assets, and in the course of 9 months, I lost everything and ended up $5 million in debt. Yeah, so it's been
Wow.
a it's been you ask my story, that's my story.
Yes,
It's
I mean that's fascinating, right? I mean it's there are a few people that I can think of that have gone through hardship like that, right? I mean they've kind of bounced back, but majority of us, I'll include myself, right? And we didn't take a big hit in the last downturn just because we weren't active in real estate, and can only hear the stories that everybody else around us tells us, right? I mean, it's really amazing, and I'm sure there's a lot more details to what your story is, right? It's. I think one of the things that you mentioned is it was the building that took you down, whereas we're
yeah,
sitting here talking about multifamily and some of the larger stuff, right?
single
It's
family
so
bed. Awesome.
it's yeah. I bet. I mean, just quickly, what were some of the lessons? I mean, I obviously you couldn't control the market, you couldn't control what happened to the banks and things like that, right? I mean, were there things that you took from your doings back then that you wouldn't do today? Just quickly, and I know we got to get into kind of the meat, right?
I will go to my grave thinking I had a very well managed business,
Okay.
right? I
Yeah.
really, truly, we were 70% LTV or better on every property we owned, including the 13-story.
Okay.
Like we were
That's great.
in really good shape
Absolutely.
financially. And I mean, we were bringing $500,000, and this is back, right, 15, 18 years ago.
That's right.
We were still doing $500,000 a month. I mean, it was really, really good. But the issue that I ran into is if you have a mortgage,
Yep.
it doesn't matter how good an operation you run, that bank gets to make decisions in your life, and you have zero control over it.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's
That was that was the biggest lesson I had.
yeah. It's one of the drawbacks, I guess. If even if you would call it that, right? I mean, it's one of the risk profiles of the business that we're in, right? It's very true, and very real.
We've got now on the fifth bank failure in the last 5 weeks,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
We're going through that same process again, and yeah, it's a really interesting time to reflect, right? What did I learn? I learned that banks are not stable, and putting your entire $80 million worth of investment
That's right.
wiped out in the course of 9 months.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
We're
the banks are really, really, we have this vision of how strong a bank is and how strong. I mean, we're talking Washington Mutual, Ocwen, obviously Bear Stearns, and Lehman Brothers. Some of
that's
the
right.
largest financial institutions on the planet all failed.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, as we're recording this, right? We're going through it, and it was the last week we had First Republic was the latest victim, and you know, not to get into too many details, right? Because we got to get our show, and
Yeah.
I really want to talk about our subject today, which you know um, I've heard about it. I know some people have, but many people don't know much about it, and that's the national historic properties, right? I mean, that's some of these historic properties that we talk about. It's kind of like a category, if you would, right? I mean, it's not necessarily an asset class or anything like that. That we just talk about multifamily and apartments and self storage and things like that. I mean, the national historic properties. I mean, that's something new to most people, right? I mean, if we could give us a little bit about what that means and what it actually entails, and then
Sure.
can go from there.
So it could be really any asset class, right? It could be, it's probably not storage because there aren't there aren't 100-year brick buildings that are storage, but
That's right.
uh office buildings, hotels, and and multifamily, right? Those are kind of what you're looking for. But the National Historic System has an overlay, right? You can type in any address in the US and it'll give you exactly where these properties are. And if you're fortunate enough to have it's called a district, National
Yep.
Historic Registry District. If you're lucky enough to have your house in a district, then or multifamily or whatever it is, then you can get some substantial tax credits, right?
Okay.
Um, on a national level, 20% off everything that you do. So if you're doing $1 million renovation, the IRS is going to give you $200,000 worth of tax credits. And
That's
that's
great.
any profits you or any other building, any profits that you would owe to the US government, you can use that tax credits to offset any potential.
That's great. Is that tax credit? Is that on an annual basis? How does that work? Can you give us a little more detail on what is that? What like how does that apply to your profits? Right.
Any so you could make profits in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you could divide that tax credit into all 5 of those years.
Not necessarily a profit on upon sale. Right. I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at.
Yeah, any profit
Similar to like an
you
opportunity
owe an
zone or anything
eighty
like that.
thousand dollar bill to the IRS next year, you can subtract your $200,000 credit from the 80,000 that you owe, and now all of a sudden you owe zero.
Gotcha.
It is really that simple. There's
Is
like yeah, it's pretty
is that
straightforward.
is that a tax credit? Because I know there's a tax credit versus tax abatement, right? I mean, like, where does this fall into those categories?
All right, so tax abatement is different than tax credit. For example, the property that we're trying to buy over in Cheney, Washington, it's a student housing, right? For example, there's about 1.7, 1.8 million in renovations,
Sure.
right? And so any renovation that you do, you get that tax credit. But additionally, because the state and these local agencies, local cities and counties recognize that it's expensive to rehab a historic building, the state or county or whatever jurisdiction will also give you a tax abatement, meaning if you owe 10,000, if you owe $40,000 a year on your property taxes, that can get waived for as long as 24 years, right?
That's
So
pretty powerful.
yeah, when you think
Yeah, I mean
about,
these.
so there's a property I'm looking at over in Portland, right? They've got $35,000 in property taxes
Okay.
with a signature on a document and an architect, right? It might cost you $1,000 to get the signature. You can wipe away $35,000 of taxes in the city of Portland for 10 years. That's
That's amazing.
$350,000 additional profit
That's
going
right.
directly to the NOI.
That's right. Now, do you have to identify these properties? You mentioned you go to the website and it's got, you can identify these properties, right? Is this something when you're underwriting your properties, right? Is this something that kind of goes in as part of the business plan, or do you use that as kind of a additional benefit? So, for example, right, if I'm underwriting a property, right, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily write in depreciation into the business plan, right? To me, stuff like that is added bonus, added benefits, right? How does this play into the underwriting when you're looking at properties, looking for properties? What is this? How does this play into it?
So I automatically eliminate the property taxes because I know that that's an easy thing to do, right? If there's $10,000 a year in property taxes, $100,000 in property taxes, I know that that is a 10-minute chore with a architect, and I can eliminate those taxes off the bat, right? There's a little bit of more work involved, but
Sure.
overall, you can eliminate those taxes, whatever the property taxes are, pretty easily. So I do build that into the underwriting, right? Which allows me to look at properties that other people have overlooked,
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
here's your NOI, and it says, let's say 350,000. That's how much actual net revenue is coming in. But if I know how to increase or eliminate rather 10% of those taxes, this other 35,000,
Yep.
what's that do to my cap rate?
No, that's right. That's exactly
Right?
right.
So that
Yeah.
it is literally that quick. The other piece is I don't build in the tax credit because you really have to do a lot of work on that business in that property, whether it's multifamily or commercial. You have to do a lot of work to get that tax credit. So I don't build that part into the plan.
That's super interesting. I feel like it's kind of when you get into the details, right? I mean, it's example I gave, right? I mean, depreciation, you don't write that into your underwriting, but it's like knowing the nuances of, your tax credits, your tax abatements, your, just anything that has to do with the property itself and all the renovations that you're doing. Just knowing that up front, it really helps kind of solidify the business plan. It's like
I have one
you
more.
gotta know. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So you can write it into your business plan. Let's use my example of I'm getting $500,000 worth of tax credits,
Sure.
right? There's an open market for those tax credits, right? So let's say we got $500,000 worth of tax credits in this transaction. You can go to the open market and get paid 90 cents, 80 to 90 cents on the dollar for those tax credits.
Okay.
So let's take that example and we're going to sell those tax credits. Someone's going to give you a for check that you can now apply to the payment of
That's right. So
the.
you could actually underwrite it at market, right? And
Yep,
knowing that that's additional kind of income, if you would, that's going to come in, right?
exactly. Yeah. So
That's a hundred.
I don't underwrite it that way because
Yeah,
I want the tax credits, but I
of
do
course.
know an investor who openly sells his. I know an investor with 6 different historic properties. That's his entire portfolio,
Sure.
and he will sell those tax credits.
That's amazing. Does that have to be
So,
within the same county, or does it have to be within the same county or district, or can it just be kind of anywhere in the U.S.?
so the U.S. has a statute of 20%.
Okay.
And then, for example, Colorado gives another 35% based on the county.
Gotcha. Okay.
Washington State, where I live, does not do that. Oregon will give you tax abatements for 10 years. Washington will give you tax
That's
abatements
great.
for, yeah, I mean, it is
That's
very
amazing.
specific to the area, state by state and county.
Sure.
So you do
What
have to do some investigation.
Gotcha. So one last question on that before we move on. I know when when you've got appraisers coming in,
Yeah.
they're looking at the property itself. Am I right to assume that they're looking at it as a open market property, or do they look at it as a historical kind of type property? And how do they look at it? I guess from an appraisal standpoint.
This is gonna. I buy everything cash. I
Okay.
don't get an appraisal, so
Okay.
that I don't actually know that answer.
Right.
Number one, how much I don't like banks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do cash.
That's
I
amazing.
haven't had an appraisal.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Great. Now, I mean, just simple question, right? I mean, why does someone like me, why should I care, right? It's, and I know it's a straightforward, pretty forward question to ask, but, what makes it so important to kind of know and attractive, I guess, right? I know we talked about all the taxes. I mean, it seems like a lot of headache, right? But I mean, as a passive investor, obviously I don't care, right? It's like you're doing all the work,
Nobody
but
should. Yeah,
yeah,
but you as a passive investor get those pass-through tax advantages, right?
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that most people aren't aware of. Generally speaking, these properties in National Historic Districts are beautiful, like really, truly works of art. You cannot reproduce these properties anymore. The craftsmanship in America does not
Yep.
exist. And it's important to preserve those. And I think both the federal and the state governments recognize the value of these properties, and they will incentivize you heavily to
Right.
invest in
Right.
them. I think it's important because it's part of our history, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. And
I'm glad that you care.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, as that's one part that we don't pay attention to necessarily, right? I mean, at bottom line, it just oftentimes it comes down to money, and it's tough to care, but the incentives are there, right? It's they're there for a reason, and I'm glad there are ways to take advantage of these incentives because you're also doing good for the properties and for the communities as well. So that's huge.
I love the whole program. It's really fascinating to me just because some of these buildings will get demolished. If investors don't step up, we lose an important part of the fabric of what makes
Sure.
America really a nice place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you only looking at these types of properties at this point, or are you kind of like what's your kind of buy box, if you would? Are you only looking at these types of properties?
Two very different buy boxes.
Yeah,
I love. Okay, so affectionately call them black beauties, right? These brick black beauties. They're gorgeous. So I like my old historic stuff,
yep,
and then I love brand new construction, shiny glass, small
love
cottage
that.
homes. Put as much density on a square foot as possible. So
That's right.
it is a very weird combination that I do.
Um, Now, kind of going back to like the historic properties, I mean, who is this beneficial for? I mean, what type of investor would benefit most from types of investments, I guess? Is
So
there like a
you're
specific
Yeah,
group or
I would specifically go after your higher net worth people with significant tax problems, right? If I could, if you have I don't know who your investor base is, but I have a lot of teachers and military in my family, so that's not really a big problem. But
sure,
you're in the Bay Area, you have a lot of high net worth individuals probably having significant tax problems, i.e., having to write a big check to the IRS.
that's right.
This is a perfect investment for those kinds of people with a high paying $500,000 W 2 job with a lot of taxes because the tax abatement and the tax credit I'm sorry, the tax credit flows to your investors. So they would enjoy that piece of it.
So meaning flows to investors, as in it can offset their active income. Is that how
Right.
it works?
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Um,
Any tax that you're owing to the US can be offset by these national historic renovation projects.
that's amazing. Are you currently looking at a specific? So let me ask that question differently. Are these properties more so available in a particular area of the country? Like, where are they mostly located? I don't know if you know the answer. I don't know if you've kind of
Mhm.
looked across the
Yeah.
U.S. or maybe just your own particular market, but is there like, the West has got a lot more properties than the East, or like what's the density population of these properties?
Well, sadly, you and I are on the West Coast, right? We're not as old as the East Coast properties,
That's right.
right? So they have a lot more historic districts. We just on the West Coast, we don't have as many. There's
Right.
lots in San Francisco. There's some in Oakland. Think of like the Presidio in San
That's right.
Francisco. Yeah,
Yep. Big
beautiful.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And those
Um,
those buildings are just amazing, well kept and just beautiful, right? I mean, you would never even know how old they are. That's
Yeah,
that's how
they're
well
all
they've been
100,
preserved.
125 years old. Uh,
Easily. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely at this point. Um,
So old neighborhoods often, even in obscure areas, right? Cheney, Washington is only a 12,000 person population, but they've got a huge National Historic District. And
it's
that's
amazing.
what made that attractive because our property is literally across the street from the university.
Sure. And as far as kind of, I know we're getting a little too technical here, but I'll ask anyways. As far as kind of changing that risk profile for that particular property, whether it's, higher expenses, higher, capex costs and things like that. What are some of the things that you look at, when you're underwriting or like once you get into these properties, like what are some of the things that you would look for and look at as far as risk is concerned, right? I would assume maybe some of the operating costs might be different than our, general multifamily stuff. But yeah, if you could kind of explore that a little bit.
So the one thing that's really advantageous and counterintuitive, I'm looking for heavy renovation, right? The building that we're looking at, there's 1.7 to $2 million in renovation. I'm going to pack as
Right.
much into the reno as I can because I know that I'm getting 20 cents on the dollar back.
That's right.
So it's you don't skimp on the renovation on one of these projects. You throw as much money into the solution as possible.
Gotcha. And
It's
are they,
very intuitive.
what's that?
It's very counterintuitive.
Yeah,
Most
no, absolutely.
investors want to go as light as possible,
That's right.
but for
Biggest
these,
bang for your buck. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, getting that 20% discount right off the bat is huge. Right? I mean, it's especially with inflation the last couple of years. I feel like that kind of
yeah,
takes you back to our prices, a couple of years ago. But one thing I wanted to ask is, it just skipped my mind. But yeah, I mean, this is super interesting. I mean, like I said, I hadn't really, I'd heard about it, hadn't really talked about it, but as far as like what you're looking for now, we talked about bolting on different asset classes to it,
yeah.
right? What's your kind of what's your go-to asset class that you would want to bolt onto this
I
category, I
love
guess?
student housing is definitely my favorite.
Okay.
So especially in this scenario where we're taking a 16 unit, we're taking it down to the studs. As long as you leave the exterior in its pristine shape, you can do pretty much anything on the interior. And so we're going from 16 units to 72, allowing us to maximize the square footage and get a very, very large tax advantage.
Yep.
So that's kind of my play. There's some really great buildings over in Portland that I'm looking at. They're 30% occupied. They're old office buildings. Same exact thing. You could turn those into so you can
That's
use
amazing.
this plan on most historic buildings and
That's amazing. But your go-to right now at this point is student housing. I feel like that's a great bolt-on to just be able to take best of both worlds, right?
yeah, stability and tax advantage. I like student
Just
housing a
real
lot.
estate, it just keeps giving, right? I mean, we talk about advantages and benefits of real estate, but it's just like
Yeah.
depending on what you're doing with it and how you're kind of managing your portfolio. It's just so many things you can do with real estate. And that's what's amazing to me.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and there's options, right? That I looked at this property specifically from an infill perspective. I looked at it initially and saw that there was a great big giant parking lot next door that went
yep,
with the property, thinking I could build additional units on back. So, I mean, it works really well if you're doing infill work as well.
that's amazing. Yeah, just having that flexibility really works. John, I really appreciate your time. I do want to be mindful of our time here together. And one last question before we depart. How can everybody get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in touch with you if anyone's got questions or just want to connect?
Yeah, so easiest way is john at ratracerescue.net. Our website is Rat Race Rescue. Super cheesy, just like me.
Love that. I
It's
will
got,
never forget this website. I'll tell you that much.
see, yep, it's super. My wife, like, oh
Oh
no. So,
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
No, it's
uh,
great.
yeah. So
Um,
ratracerescue.net. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. I look forward to continuing to talk and yeah, I feel like I need to either come up or next time you're down here in the Bay Area, we definitely have to connect and meet in person. So I really
I would.
appreciate your time, John. And yeah, let's keep talking. And hopefully everybody got the same value out of it as I did. So appreciate your time.
All right. Happy to help. Let me know if you need anything.
Thank you, John. Thanks for watching today's episode of the True Wealth Project. And I hope you enjoyed today's guest as well. If you want to catch more of these episodes, be sure to like and subscribe us on YouTube as well as other podcast platforms. You can also get in touch with me by following me on Instagram at official Sam Khairi, or you can send me an email at sam@aftocapital.com. That's sam@aftocapital.com. See you soon.